see. Morning, folks. Today we're going to continue our look at Chapter 6. Oh, why is this private? Okay. Weird. Okay, so in Chapter 6, so far we've covered the box model, which includes, padding, margin, and border, those CSS properties. We've discussed normal flow. Make sure that you use, make sure that your web page has a normal flow. And we talked about the position property. So if you're not sure what any of that is, make sure you look back and check out the previous videos. We're going to continue our discussion. So we left off with the position property, and we looked at the difference between absolute position, relative position, and the default value for the position property, which was static. All right, so we have the ability to stack elements and position them on the page either relative to their container or relative to where they would be placed in normal flow. So absolute only cares about the container. It ignores normal flow, and we saw that last time. Relative follows normal flow, so it gets placed by normal flow, and then you're able to position it from wherever it ends up. Okay, so the next thing we need to talk about is the float property. Okay, so we can see this here. The property can either be float left or float right. Those are the ones that are covered in the book. And we can double check what the other values are by using a reference. So there are everything is float none by default, so there's no float applied. Float left, float right, and then these options we don't need to worry about. Okay. So here we can see an example of float left. We have, let's go ahead and steal this code so that we can test it out. And we'll create a Chapter 6 float demo. Okay, whoops, that's in the wrong box. Chapter 6, float demo. Okay, it gave me the default name of Tubby Offbeat Loop Fusion. That's not what I want. I want how many times am I going to type this before it keeps it? All right, chapter 6, float demo. All right, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and post this in the chat for anyone that wants to take a look at it and mess around. All right, and now we want to grab the example code so that way I can illustrate a little bit better than this example here. It's kind of hard to see what's going on. All right, they want a picture of a pineapple. So we can find that simple. I want a maybe a GIF. Here we go. This is a happy little pineapple. Okay, so if I want to use a picture from my computer, I can upload that to Replit using this little option here. Under Files, we can upload file. Add in our picture of a pineapple, which they were using a JPG, but I want to use a GIF. And it has a capital P. So let's change the file name to lowercase p. So the references are case sensitive. Any file path is going to be case sensitive in most things. So to keep things simple, I highly recommend when you're naming your files, or basically anything, you use all lowercase letters. Now in some programming languages there are different naming standards, but in this case, when naming files, unless otherwise, for some other purpose, some file names need to be a specific name. Here, since I get to name it, I'm going to use all lowercase letters, so that way I don't have to worry about it. Alright, so we got our dancing pineapple here. And if we look at the way this page is set up, excuse me, we have a paragraph set up here, and that covers the image. So we can set this down here so we can see it a bit better. I think if we do this, there we go. So let's get rid of this. It's telling us what a float is and or does. And we're left with this part. And our closing paragraph tag. Alright, let's see if it likes that. There we go. I just want to be able to allow you to see the distinct parts. so that we can look at how it would be in normal flow. So if we did not use FloatLeft, here's what the page would look like. We have the image inside the paragraph, so it's going to be placed first, because that is here. All right. And images are inline by default, so they're going to try to go on the same line. So if I put another pineapple, where do you think it's going to go in relation to this page? Anyone know? So let's add another one, and we'll just make it a little bit smaller. And so they're using inline CSS here. 85. 85. And it has some margin right. All right. So every image you add is going to be on the same line here. Let's add another one. Where do you think it's going to go if I add it here? And we'll do one more. Holding Control while I select the second part so I can type 21 in both. All right, so we got our dancing pineapples here, and this is how things are placed using normal flow, and there are no other positioning or float CSS properties added. So they're using the defaults. So a paragraph by default is a block element, but within that we're putting, it might be more accurate, instead of putting a paragraph here, just to put a div and a div. Let's see if that changes anything. Okay, and then we can put this text in a span. And that should allow us to manipulate it separate, while allowing us to keep the pictures on the same line. Okay. So this is how I would have set this up. And we've got our images here. I'm going to separate these out. It's good to not add these spaces in your code when you're putting it all together. You don't want to have all these extra lines in here, but I like to put them so that you can kind of see them distinct. So here, here there's a space here, because this is the here's an image element. So 1, 2, 3, 4 images, and then down here is the text. I've surrounded it with a span tag. So does anyone remember what the span tag does? It has a default display property of inline, and that is why the text is going to stay on the same line as the images here. If I used a div or a paragraph, what would it look like? So if I did that, since it's a block element, it wouldn't allow anything on the same line. So let's keep it a span, because we need that for the example here. All right. So let's set the first, or let's set all of these images to float left. So I have this in my embedded style sheet. Remember, that is a set of style tags, open and closing, inside the head section. And then I have my CSS rule here. It has the selector. So this is going to select all image elements on the page, and it's going to give them a float property with the value of left. So the default is none. That's what we're seeing here. Now we're going to set all of the images to float left. All right. So it looks a little bit different. What about if we float right? Okay, so we have that. So those are some options we have if we want the images to be to the right of the text, or if we want them to be to the left. We can use that. And when you use float right and float left versus the default, with float none, so that's the default, it's going to put things in normal flow like this. So it's going to put the first image on the line here. Okay, and then it's going to put the next image here, next, and next. And then, right after the image, since these are inline elements, it's going to just start from where that image left off and put the text. And so I'm going to open this in a new tab so you can see. And I'm going to hit F12 so we can look at the inspector. And we can see the space taken up by each image. And then because the container has to contain all of this, since the image is larger, it's creating a bunch of empty space above the element. Remember, this is float none. And if we set it to float left, you notice it does this. And so now the images are going to go to the leftmost side of the container. And since all of these images have float left, what it's doing is the first one is going all the way to the left, and the next one is going all the way to the left, but to the right of the previous image, and so on and so forth. Okay, so now we don't have to deal with that extra space, but having your text like this is kind of annoying. You kind of want your left side of your text to be aligned. So let's just take out these other three images for now. We might need those again in a second. I think we will. Whoops. Okay. So here, with this image, we have some left aligned text here. It goes to it fills the space after this has taken the space on the left, because we float this left. Okay. Now, this is fairly simple. You know, remember, this isn't just a line left or a line right. Float left and float right actually changes the way normal flow handles this. All right, and the next, so float left and float right, pretty simple, but there is another property here. I think they talk about it in the book, but they don't have it here, so we'll have to look it up. Alright, and we have, what is it called? It's called clear float. Or clear, actually. Here we go. The CSS property clear let's take a look here what this does. So here we have an image floating left, that's here, and then there's the code for that. And then this text here is a paragraph, okay? And down here we have another paragraph, but this one has a class of clear. See if I can make that a little bit bigger. Okay. And so let's change this class to something else. So you can see that there's a difference between the clear property and the name of the class. It doesn't have to be clear to use this. It's just the name of the class, which, if you remember, you get to choose. And this is another case where you should name your classes and IDs in CSS with all lowercase characters. You know, you can use numbers. I'm not sure. I don't think you can start with a number. A lot of times you can't for names, but here, yeah. So you can't start with a number in the name, so stick to all lowercase alphanumeric characters. Or alphabet characters, sorry. A through Z, lowercase. No spaces, no symbols, just lowercase characters. Alright, so why, if I don't use this class, looks like this. Okay, and when I do use the class, that will add the clear property with the value of both to wherever any paragraph that I add this class to. Okay, this selector is saying find all paragraphs that have a class of my class and apply this. Okay, in this case, we don't necessarily have to select, excuse me, the paragraph part. So if we just call it dot my class, should work still. Yeah. So you can use either one of those selectors. Alright, and so you'll see because we've cleared the float, so we did clear both on this element down here, it will ignore and not allow anything to float to the left of it. Okay, or the right, because we used both. We can do left, and that should keep the same. If we use right, it should go back up because nothing's floating to the right. Okay? So let's keep this in mind. I'm going to add this class to the example so we know we can use that. Alright. We'll put that up in our embedded CSS. And so by having this class here, by adding that, what will it do? Nothing yet, because we haven't applied it to any elements. But we might use it later, so I can illustrate some things that you can use this for. Okay, so we have float left. Let's take a look at float right one more time with this so we know the difference. All right. I'm assuming most people know their left from their right. Some people don't. It's definitely something you want to figure out if you're using CSS. All right. If you do have trouble keeping track of left and right, you can use the old trick where you hold up each of your hands and you make this shape, and whichever one is a proper L, so your left, when you're looking at it, will form an L. That's how you can tell which way is left. If you're driving, please don't let go of the steering wheel and do this. Okay. And that's called a mnemonic device. There are tricks that can help you remember things. Okay. Alright, I think we've said enough about float left and right for now. So why would we use this, right? Whoop-de-doo, I can put stuff on the left and I can put stuff on the right. Well, you remember, in the previous assignments and examples, all of our pages are left aligned by default and a single column. But we want to be able to create a page with multiple columns because it'll look more modern. Though, I will say, for mobile development, since the screen is taller than it is wide, it is in a portrait orientation, and the screen is small, you do want to design a mobile site that will be one column. There's nothing worse than using a mobile version of a site that requires you to scroll left and right. You want to eliminate that if possible. And we'll talk about that next chapter. Okay, so with the box model, the position property, normal flow, the display property, we should be able to build some basic CSS layouts. So let's go through the process of building something similar to this page. And do you recognize what this on the left is? We talked about it in chapter 5. This is a wireframe. And so the way we interpret this is we will add a wrapper class, and we can use a div for that. And we'll put that around everything on the page so that we can center that wrapper on the page. Alright, so let's go ahead and use what we have here. We'll consider this the content for the page. So all we have so far with this example is this part right here in the white. Okay, so we can see that easier, let's go ahead and call this, we're going to change it from, why is this a closing div tag? That's not right. Odd. Okay, we're going to change this to have a kind of a gray background so we can see it compared here. So HTML5 introduced some HTML elements to replace commonly created divs. So the content area of the page, where we're ignoring the header, we're ignoring the footer, we're ignoring the navigation, so the menu that allows you to access different parts of the site, we're going to add that in later using different elements. This is just what's going to appear in the center of the page. Okay? So we can do, instead of div, we want to use the main element. Okay? It's pretty much identical to a div, but it makes it easier for web crawlers to identify your page and add it to search engines and pull out the relevant information for search results. It also makes it a lot easier for anyone who uses a screen reader to browse the internet. So they could have shortcuts in their screen reader, and they just have to press a key to switch to the main. That way it doesn't have to read the header, menu, and footer every time they try to browse the page. So it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes when you're designing something, but it's the most important part of designing something. If you're designing something for other people to use, remember we learned this in chapter 5, you have to consider your target audience. So if people that can't see the site and read it that way because they may be blind or have, poor eyesight, they may use a screen reader. And so if you don't set that up to make it easy for them, you're kind of cutting out that audience. And anyone that isn't using a screen reader won't notice the difference. So it's just a good thing to do. It's a good business decision. It's an ethical decision. And it makes your site more professional. Okay, so we have our main section with a picture of a dancing pineapple and some text. Okay, and so this is our index.html. I just remember this. There is one more thing I want to mention about floats. So we'll come back to building this page to look like this layout here in a second. I'm going to add another page here and we'll call it float.html. Alright, and in here we will use an example of floats to show you how you can control this, and this will be important for different kinds of layouts. So let's change the main content of this page to be 4 divs. Alright, so in the main content we're going to add 4 divs. So if I do div, enter, in Replit, it'll know that you want to create an element. Div enter, div enter, div enter. All right. And so I want to change these independently. So I can't use in my CSS, I can't use a div tag selector. Why not? Why can't I use a div tag selector? What will happen? It'll apply all of those rules, or it'll apply all of those property changes to all of the divs. So what can I use instead of a tag selector? Well, in this case, we can use a class selector. So let's call this box 1. And we'll get rid of this. We don't need this rule. And we'll make box 1 through box 4, because we have 4 divs. I'll say this part of floats to figure out on your own is very confusing. And the reason I know that, so I'm just assuming this is for other people too. It took me forever to figure out how this worked, and I did find an amazing video that explains in as short amount of time and as clearly as I've ever found how to understand this. And so you can check out that video. I usually show it in class, but I'm not going to waste your time here showing it in this video. You can check it out yourself. So that is right here, this normal, flow, and floats video. All right. So we have a video on understanding normal flow. You can check that out. This one right here is the video on how to use float and clear to create different layouts, or basically to organize your floats. And I just want to show you a few of the examples here, and then we'll apply that. Okay, so the important thing is you have to think of the page as a three-dimensional object. Okay, even though it's 2D, there are different layers. Okay, so this is what we're going to create first. 4 divs, which are just colored boxes. Okay, and they'll use normal flow. So let's do that first in our new page here. So for this to show up, we're going to have to give it a height. Property of, we'll go 200 pixels. And we can use this for each of these. And so since we want all the divs to be 200 pixels, height with a height of 200 pixels, let's not copy that 4 times. That doesn't make any sense, right? It's monotonous. We can use a shortcut by using the div selector. So if for this page, I want all divs to be 200 pixels tall. How would I do that? I can change the height here 1 time, and that'll apply to all the divs. Okay. Now the divs are not going to appear any differently here, so let's add some colors. And we will use a background color of some random stuff. Right, and then I'll go ahead and copy this, and I'll put the cursor here, and I'll use Control to put it here, and here, here, and here. Okay, so now I can paste that in. So since we do want different colors on these, we will need to use a class to specify differences. And we want to change these colors. Let's try the opposite. So let's go df684. And then down here, we'll do 885411. Okay. And I made a mistake because these only have 5 numbers. So I have to add in another number here. And we use the opposite of that one for here. So 114588. Okay. And now how can I actually see this page? Because if I run it, if I run this site, it's going to show me the index every time. So how can I look at the float HTML? How can I do that? So we're always going to load this page. Let's add a link to the other page. And so I'll end up putting this in the navigation. So I'm just going to throw it out here for now. We can move it later. So what is the element for creating a hyperlink? It's the anchor tag. So we need an opening and closing a tag. All right, and then we need an attribute to tell it where to go when we click it. And let's create the text. So between the tags, you put the text that will appear on the page. And then in an href attribute, we put the address. And we're going to use a relative link. And you use relative links when you are creating a hyperlink to a page within the same site. And it's a little more shorthand. You don't have to include the protocol. You can just use the name of the file because they're in the same folder. So we have a float.html. And that'll give us a link here. And now we can see that page. And we probably need to give it, because there's no content in there, I think we actually need to give it a width also to make it show up. Right. All right, so let's check to make sure. So, all right, it's not working. So let's figure out why. We don't need this anymore. All right, so what did I do wrong? Well, I don't see, nothing is standing out to me here about why it might be causing an error. A good place to start is to grab your CSS code, all of it, and use the CSS Validator. I'm going to close some of these tabs before I get lost. Okay, so CSS Validator. And we don't need this open. So we want to select the validator, and we're just going to, by direct input, paste in our code to be tested. And all right, no error found. So it's not that. Next, let's see what the browser thinks is that we're trying to put on the page. Okay, so we can open in a new tab, check the page, and then we'll open F12 and we'll see where that div is. So I put it in the main, so here's the div. Alright, for some reason the background color isn't showing up. Okay, they are the right size and they're in the right order. Background color. Something's wrong with the background color here. So we need 6 numbers between 0 and F. I don't see any problems with that. Let's just try this for now. Red. Well, let's see what properties it thinks there are on these elements. So let's select the first div, and then down here in styles we can see, oh wow, I forgot to apply the classes to the divs. So we can't see. You check the desk drawers? If it's not in there, there's some in the tool shed. Alright, so we need to apply these classes to the actual elements. Do you remember how to do that in HTML? You have to use the class attribute. Remember, attributes always go after the name of the element, the element's tag name, in the opening tag. So right here we can do class box1. And we can just paste that down through here. Alright, and then we can change it here. 2, 3, 4. Alright, now it should work. There are our boxes. How terrible are the colors? We have dark and light blue and dark and light brown. Interesting. Let's make those 4 different looking colors. So I'm going to throw this, I believe the color selector tool in Replit will only work in a CSS file. So I'm going to copy this CSS into the CSS file so we can use that tool. Alright, so I put these in here. It detects the colors. So let's change this to a brighter orange. Okay, and there we go. Let's change this to a brighter color. So you just highlight over the color number, then you can change it. Okay, let's go with a green. Okay, kind of a chartreuse green. Chartreuse-ish. Okay. Probably not a real word. But if you say it and people know what it means, it is now a real word. Okay. That's how language exists. So we've got a blue, orange, green. Let's do a purple for this one. Alright. So we can do kind of a more Royal Majesty type purple or a more kind of fuchsia, pink purple. Let's go with that. Alright, it's going to blow our eyes out. It's so bright. Alright, and then now that we have those set up, we can put it back in the embedded. So we can easily change it. So I'll just overwrite. Did I copy? Yeah, I copied all of the CSS, I hope. No, only the box 1 through 4. So I'm going to make sure I don't overwrite the other rules. So I'm just select these and paste that in. And now we have some more interesting colored boxes. Alright. And I think they kind of go off the page here. So let's make them a little bit smaller so we can see it all on the page. And since I set up all divs to be used here, I only need to change it in one place. Okay, so, and I think I should only need to give it a height. I'll make it a little smaller, 150. Okay. Alright. We want a width of 150. I don't think it'll work the way I'm thinking. So in this case, height of 150. Since div elements go across the whole page, because they're block elements, it's not what I want. Let's try a width and see if that works. But now they have 0 height, so I guess we do need to use both. So we can just go back here, undo. Alright, and then we can change it to 150. Alright, so now we have our boxes, they all fit on the page. They're on the left here because of normal flow. Not because we're floating left. What happens if we set all the divs to float left? What do you think that would look like? Well, let's see. So it changes to this. The first one is going to go all the way to the left of the container, and the other ones will follow that without overlapping. Alright, so we can see that here in the video. This guy does a really good job explaining this, and I'm just doing it for you here, but you can watch the video if you forget, or you want to see another one. And so here,
first block, the red.
the idea is when you apply float, you need to imagine that it is going to rise up into the upper layer. All right, so instead of applying FloatLeft to all of them, let's try adding it to just one of the boxes so we can see that. So remember, we have 4 boxes on the page. We are going to float left the first one, and then the rest we're not going to float. So we have 4 boxes. We refresh it. What happened? What do you guys think happened here? So when you're looking at this and thinking about it in terms of 2D, it may look like we lost a box. Where do you think that box went? And so this is why I like this video, because when we floated left, we put that item up here, but again, you don't see that, you just need to imagine this. What happens to the other boxes? See? It's still there, but it's under the one we floated left. Okay, how would we fix that? Or maybe we want it to be that way. For example, if we wanted to make the box under it slightly larger, all right, give it 20 pixels more of a size. Whoops. And then we can see that it is indeed under that. But the element that has been floated is now above the other one. And so you can see that here in the video. This is how you need to imagine it when working with floats. Once I saw this, it made perfect sense. All right, and so here's demonstrating as you float the other boxes, the other ones will shift under. So let's try that. Let's float one more, and then we should be good to move on. So we're going to float left the first one and the second one. So which one do you think will disappear in this case? Okay, so these are the 2 we floated left. And these other 2, the purple and the green, are not floated. They do not have their float property value is none by default. So you have to watch out for that when using float. Let's go ahead and float all 4 of them left. And so if we're going to do that, they're all divs, we can put it in here. All right, and then that creates this type of situation that we saw earlier. All right. And I'm going to change this back to the right size, the same size as the others. Okay. Now, what if we do want some of these boxes under or just below here, not under them, but just below? This is where we can use the clear property. So let's say I want these 3 under the blue one. We can go to box 2 and we can set a property of clear left. And so this means I will float left, but I will not allow other elements to float left of me. Okay. And so we can move that set of elements down using clear left. if we wanted to create a square of these boxes, where do you think we would put the clear? So if we put it on the second one, it does this. How would we create? We want the blue one here, the orange one here, and then green and purple. All we have to do is move the clear left, to the third box. All right. And then we have this situation. All right. And so you can see we can kind of create a layout using this by setting these to different sizes. We can manipulate that. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll call this, we're going to rename this to float with clears. Okay, now I'll have to change the hyperlink to go there. Float with clears .html. So now we can go there, and now let's create another file called float layout .html. And then in here, we'll go ahead and copy this, and let's go ahead and create a layout where we'll have a header, 2 columns, and a footer. And so we'll use the first box as the header, and the last box as the footer, and the 2 boxes in the middle as the content area. Alright, how do we do that? So we want to use the blue box at the top. So we don't want anything to float left of that. Okay. So we add the clear left to box 1. Okay, and that will allow us to use that. Whoops. I have to create a new hyperlink to this new file here. And the name of the file is FloatLayout.html. Okay, and anchor elements are inline, so it puts the links like this. Okay, let's use a better structure for that. How about in unordered list? Do you remember how to use an unordered list? And then each of the links will be a list item in the unordered list. So before the anchor and after, I need to put it in an li element. So I could take this and put it inside here. And I can do the same thing here, and let's see how that looks. And that way we can more easily identify which ones are the links. So there we go, we have that. Okay, and then it looks like we've created another problem here. Why did it add that space? Let's make sure that it didn't do that. Okay, so why did it add that space? Well, actually off the top of my head I'm not sure, but I know how to find out. Let's open the inspection tool and see what's causing that space. Maybe it's because I did not close my UL tag. So I did know. Okay, so that'll fix that. Don't forget to close your tags. Happens to everyone at some point. Taught this class for 6 years, and I still make those kind of mistakes, but once you make those mistakes enough, you can quickly identify how to fix it. Okay. So we have that, and now change this to floats layout. I'm going to change the text here so we know which one's which. So float layout. So we have floats and clears. We have float layout. Okay, and we just copy the other page for now, so now we can change it. I do want to show you, well, we'll do it later when we work on the navigation. Okay, so we want to go back to the layout page. Okay, and so float layout. Why does it look like this here? Well, it's adjusting for the smaller space. Okay. And if we make it bigger, you can see there's a bunch of space over here, so we need to fix that too. All right. So we can set in the code for float layout. And where did the code go? We need that. There we go. And we don't care about looking at that preview. We're going to use the one, whoops, inside. Okay. There we go. We'll reload the page. All right, this is the float layout. So we want the first box to go across the top. So we do not want a specified width. Okay. And so there is a way to do that here without having to, well, we're going to change all the widths anyway, so we'll just take it out of here and we will put it in here. So we actually want it to go across the whole page, so we don't need to put a width. It will use the top of the page. And what did I break? Okay, I don't see it offhand here. So let's take a look at the inspector first. Though you can, it's a good idea to look at the validator if you haven't used CSS a lot. Okay, so we have, it has a width of 0. Now, how did we get that to go across before? Oh. We have a height of 150, but it's not going across the page here. I'm pretty sure before we had that working. So it's changing them all to 150. Why is it not doing that? Let's try not. Okay. Is it a problem with? Nope. What's the problem with this? You can turn on and off these. Elements. Oh, I'm sorry, you can turn on and off the properties here in the inspector. It's probably hard to see, but I can't zoom in on this. Maybe I can. Why would it not? It's under here. No. There's a lot of options in here, but none of them are what I'm looking for. So, is there an option in here? What is the drawer? Alright, when you can't find things, you know what the best thing to do is? Ask Google. So let's go Chrome developer tools size. Open developer tools. Switch to the network tab. In the size column. No, that's size of the file. Okay, let's try display. This was supposed to be easy. Let's try display size. It's all about changing the web page, which is not what we're looking for. And I can't find it fairly simply. So, let's check here under the help documentation. So any tool you're using, any technology, software, the documentation is the way to explain it. So if you want to know more about it, you can check the documentation. Let's see. Boop, boop, boop. What about over here? Console. Customize. Okay. Overview. Settings, preferences. Drawer. Reorder. So it tells us how to move it around. So if I can't find it in here, it's probably bonus points for anyone that figures this out. Nope. Okay. It goes for you too. How do you change the display of the Chrome developer tools? I just want to make the font larger. I know, I don't think anyone knows. Probably isn't possible. Because they did not think ahead on this. What's Lighthouse? Nope. Application. Settings. Okay, I'll give it like 2 more seconds here to look in these. No, 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 no. Okay, I'll have to figure that out later. Oh my god. Whew, there you go. Okay. Would you search for that? Okay. That's what I was thinking about, searching font. Okay, thank you. Anyway. So, okay, anyway, to make this appear here, we need to actually turn the float off for the first one. Because it doesn't make sense to float it anyway. because we want it to fill the whole top part. So we're actually going to have to take this off so it doesn't affect all the divs. And we don't care about clearing the left float in the next part because there is no float. But we do want to float left box 1, and we will float left box 2. Okay, and here's what that would look like. Okay, and we need to set the width of these other box. So box 2 and 3, we'll use hard-coded numbers here. We'll see why that's a problem, and we'll change it. So width, and here. Right? And so that looks like this. Alright, and we're taking it off of box 1. Wait, now it's working. Oh, yeah, I put it in the wrong box here. This one. There we go. So that's going to look like this. Alright. So now we have our header section set up here. Here's our content boxes, and here's the footer. Let's go ahead and label these. So we'll go header, content 1, let's call it column 1, column 1, column 2, and footer. We're just labeling them in the page so that we can keep track. So the header, column 1, column 2, and the footer. How can we get the footer to go to the bottom within here? So it is currently set up as no float, but it's after box 3, which is set to float left. So normal flow is just tossing it to the right of that. We don't want anything to the left of the footer, right? So we can use clear left. Alright, and that looks like this. That should put our footer at the bottom. Alright, so now we have a header, 2 columns for content, and a footer. We're getting closer, but these columns are too small now. Right, there's a bunch of dead space over here. And so instead of using a hard-coded value of 150 pixels, you don't want to do that because people have different sizes of screens and different layouts. So let's set these. You can use a %. Okay, and this is going to give it the % of whatever container it's in. So let's just do 50. Whoops, where'd that come from? 50% here. 50% here. And that's going to look like this. And I probably messed up the CSS somewhere. For the background color of box 4. Where did I mess that up? I don't see it, but I know a quick way to find it. I'm going to grab these two, because I'm pretty sure it's one of these that's causing it. And go back to the CSS Validator, which I hope you guys are using. It saves a lot of time instead of trying to figure out what's wrong by just looking at it. And then, okay, no errors. But why is this not working? So let's go into main, and we'll see where is box 4. So it is under column 1 and column 2. And to get it down, we do need to float it left here. Oh, I removed the clear. That's why. Clear left. I was haphazardly undoing. Whoops. I hit Control S, but you don't have to do that to save. So let's go here. All right, now we have our sections. So here we have a basic layout. Now the body has a little bit of margin in here. So let's get rid of that. So that way we can be flush with the outside, but we want it to look like this, where the part of the page we want people to look at has some dead space around it, so it looks like it's kind of floating. And so we can create a wrapper div around our 4 boxes. Okay. Div. And div. Okay, and we'll go ahead and give this a class of wrapper. And if you remember from chapter 3, there is some code for centering a page, and I just want to show you where you can find that. So chapter 3, pretty sure they threw it in here. If not, it's just in the textbook. You know what, it might have been in chapter 4. Well, if you find it, I'll just tell you now what it is. So we need to set some properties for this wrapper class, right? So we use the selector wrapper, and we're going to set margin left to auto and margin right to auto. Okay, and then we can set the width of this wrapper to a %, and then the outside will fill in the remaining %. So let's try width of 80%. So that'll leave 10% of the page on each side. Alright, so now we have this. Okay, we're getting closer. We probably do want to add some margin on the top here. This is actually the body part of the margin. So we'll just add margin top to our wrapper class. So margin top. Let's see what happens if we use auto. I think, my guess is it does nothing. Yeah, okay. Because that doesn't make sense. And let's just give it like 20 pixels. Oops. So that looks like this. Alright. And let's give the page another different background color. We'll just give it kind of a light gray. And we'll go, the higher the numbers, the lighter the color. So let's go D D D D D D D D D. Alright. And now we look like, oops, what's going on here? We look like this. Alright, and we can add a little bit of box border here. or actually let's add some box shadow to the wrapper. So box shadow, this is from chapter 4. And so we need to give it a vertical and horizontal offset first. So let's use 10px, 10px. And then we give it a blur value. We'll just use 5px for that. And then the color, we use black shadow. Okay, and why is that not going across the whole wrapper? So let's double check here what's going on. Make sure I closed and opened my tags correctly. So in our wrapper, it is only covering the top here. Why is it doing that? I wonder if it's because we're floating column 1 and column 2 there. Oh, we don't want the main outside of this. That might be a problem. We want the main inside the wrapper. So that's one thing. So remember, the main element, the idea is this is where you're going to put the content of the page. So everything that's not the navigation, the header, and the footer, because you're going to have that on every page, most likely. Let's see if that works. No, that does not work. And so, let's go ahead and set a height of 100%. It should be that by default. CSS is a lot of fun to try to figure out. Okay, so there we go. Turn this off. Right. Let's add the blur. Let's change the blur a bit so it doesn't look so thick. We'll give it like 20. See what that looks like. We don't need that anymore. And we need to look at this. There we go. That looks a lot better. So now it looks like this section is kind of lifted off the page in the middle. We're getting closer to something that is good. Okay, so I'm out of time today. We'll continue next time and finish this up and show you some more about how this stuff works together. If you have any questions, make sure that you email me. And any questions on the material, any questions on the course, any questions about any courses in the program, any questions. And so I think that's it. Oh, yeah. We will call it a day, and we'll pick this up next time. So remember, I posted that link. I'm going to make sure that it works. That'll bring you to my example here, and you can play with it and see if you can figure out how to change some stuff inside of there. All right. Have a good day, and I'll see you next week. Oh, one last thing. Sorry, I remembered what I was going to say. If you are a programming major, IT programming, or an IT web technology major, and you have not registered for spring courses, or you have not if you have not registered for spring courses, it's open since November 9th, so you can go ahead and do that. If you have not met with me to talk about what courses you're going to take in the spring, you need to schedule a meeting with me, so just send me an email and we'll get that done. Okay, third sign off. Have a good day, and I'll see you next week. All right.